welcome to Talent Hub Talk. I am Ben Duncan, and this is a place where prominent and inspirational figures from both the local ANZ and global Salesforce Ohana share their stories. In today's episode, I am delighted to be joined by Katie Villanueva, a Senior Salesforce Administrator based out of the US. Through the episode, we cover Katie's background, how she found her way into the Salesforce ecosystem, and why she is thriving since becoming a full-time Salesforce Administrator. Katie is passionate about ending the stigma around mental illness and talks openly about her own experience being diagnosed with bipolar and explains why it is important that mental illness is talked about. We go over some very important topics such as communicating openly with employers, safe spaces, and the impact of working in environments where you cannot be open, plus some resources that Katie has found valuable. This is a topic I feel strongly about, so I'm very grateful for Katie sharing her story and pushing the need for more conversation around mental illness. Katie, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We've got some really important topics to cover today, and I just want to thank Meredith, who's been a guest of ours previously, because she made this recommendation that you're someone we should definitely have on the show, and I know she'd seen one of your talks recently and was very inspired by it, so I'm really, really excited by the discussion today.
Yes, thank you, Meredith. I'm so happy to talk more about this to anyone who will listen.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So let's start with your career. So you're obviously working in the Salesforce space now, and you're a senior Salesforce administrator, I understand. But what did you do before Salesforce, and how did you then find your way into the Salesforce ecosystem?
Well, before Salesforce, I really didn't have a career path. I was a product of the economic crisis back when the economy dropped out. When I graduated with my master's degree, I was in radio for 10 years, and that's what I went to school for. And then I had lost my job like so many others, and just couldn't get back into the radio business. I don't know why, but I just couldn't get it. It's a hard business anyways to be in. So, getting out, it's hard to get back in. So I just jumped around from job to job, career to career. I did end up being a customer support agent where I used Service Cloud. And then at the company before the place that I'm at now, and then I moved to the company that I'm at now, and they had just got Salesforce and they didn't know what it was. And I had this experience, and I was like, do you know you can do this and it operates this way? And these are all the things that we can do. And so I just started, everything was open because they didn't have security around it. So I just jumped in and started making changes, and which is probably not best practice for anybody. So I had a knack for it. They recognized it, and then I got to be the admin. And I've been doing that for like 3 years.
So you wouldn't class yourself as someone that was ever technical per se, like you've kind of fallen into that and then picked up, and I guess Trailhead would have been around at that point, so that was that I'm guessing would have been key to you kind of getting familiar with what you can and can't do.
Yeah, I did jump into Trailhead right away. I had all these ideas, I saw what it could do, I just couldn't get to doing those things. So Trailhead connected those dots for me to execute those ideas, for sure.
Yeah, nice. And never looked back since you moved into the Salesforce ecosystem, kind of knew it was for you straight away?
Yep. It's my career for the end all be all till I retire.
Yeah, nice. And I on your LinkedIn, you talk about thriving and not surviving in the Salesforce ecosystem. What do you mean by that?
Well, I just feel like in those previous positions where I didn't have a career path, I was just kind of getting paid, going to work, doing the 9 to 5, hating every minute of it, coming home, resenting having to have to go back. And so, after I found this, I was like wanting to learn more, and I was excited to like get my hands on projects, and like it is just a totally different attitude towards how I spend most of my day. So I feel like that is more thriving versus surviving.
Yeah, agreed. It's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people that come into the Salesforce ecosystem probably end up working more hours than they were working before. But because they have this passion, it doesn't feel like, that added extra hours outside of the core work, the trailhead, the certifications, the studying for certs, that people, because they're passionate about it, it doesn't bring that same burden of the 9 to 5 that you were doing previously.
Exactly. That's exactly how I would say it. It doesn't have that same burden. It's just it's like a hobby. It's like I want to do this. So, it's not work if you like it, is it? you know?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So the big topic of our discussion today is going to be around mental illness, and I know you're very passionate about ending the stigma around mental illness, and you speak openly about your diagnosis of bipolar. So why is it so important that we are talking about this topic and others talk about this topic? It becomes something that everyone is talking about.
It's first and foremost super important to talk about so that we can get people the help that they need. And then also, suicide rates amongst folks with mental illness are obviously more relative than to those who do not have mental illness. So helping those people, preventing suicide is such a huge thing. And if we don't talk about the stuff that leads up to suicide and attempting suicide, then we're not going to be able to reach the people who really need that help. So not only are we talking about it for getting help and suicide awareness and prevention, but also how do we coexist with this? In my talk, 10 million people have bipolar disorder, but we don't talk about it at all. But there's 10 million people out there not knowing how to balance this in their life. So that's a lot of people we can help. And that's just bipolar. So if you think of like all these other types of mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, who can have, full-time jobs and work-life balance and all that other stuff, like those are even more people that we can help. But we can't if we don't talk about it.
100%. So obviously there's been a real increase over the years in people talking about mental health. And I must admit, when we first spoke, and I'm sure many people do this, they kind of categorize mental health and mental illness as the same thing, but they're not. There's a difference. And for anyone that kind of is unaware of that difference, how would you describe the difference between mental health and mental illness?
Yeah, mental health is, I would say, the state of your mind. It is, where are you at mentally with yourself? You don't have to be mentally ill to experience depression or anxiety, or even have a mental collapse. Like, you don't have to be mentally ill to have those terrible things happen to you, because it's like this: if your body is unhealthy, it's going to get sick. If your mind's unhealthy, it's going to get sick. But the difference between mental health and mental illness is the illness is in our genes. It's never going to go away. And no matter how well we take care of our mental health, we are susceptible to triggers and things that will set us off. And we can't, it's terrible to say. I was going to say get past it, but that's too negative of a connotation. But it's just something that we have to live with and something we'll always have to manage. I think folks that don't have mental illness, if they're able to get in a good place and they're able to maintain that, they don't have the threat of a setback of the illness taking over. And that's the difference.
Yeah. And it's obviously, like you said, it's really important that we talk about it, but it's still not something that is talked about as much as mental health. So you did a talk at Witness Success recently, and I watched the video recently, and the outpouring of emotion from the people in the audience was amazing. Like some of the comments, and it was kind of like you talking about it then gave people in the audience comfort to talk about it, and it was kind of like a weight off of their shoulders and real emotion when people were kind of commenting and giving their insight. But it's a hard thing to do, right? To talk about it. It's not because not everyone is talking about it. So is it something you've always been comfortable discussing and being open about, or has that kind of come with time? And also, has that, being in the Salesforce ecosystem, does that help you because of the kind of openness that exists in this world?
Yeah. Honestly, it wasn't anything that I hid from. I knew I had something. I was misdiagnosed with depression and anxiety before my bipolar diagnosis came out. And, it wasn't anything I went around advertising. I guess I felt so sorry for myself. I didn't want to let people know how terrible I thought of myself. So I think at first it was a lack of respect for myself and a lack of realizing that I needed help. And I wasn't necessarily ashamed. I just, it wasn't anybody's business, in my opinion. And then when I got my bipolar diagnosis, I was kind of in this situation where I was like, what do I do with this information? Like, before, when I got diagnosed, it was just kind of like, this might be what's going on. I'm like, oh, okay. But here is like, I feel like I was given a solution when I got this diagnosis, and the medications pulled through for me. And then I believed in the diagnosis, and I said, this is what I've got. How do I deal with this? And I slowly started to open up to the people closest to me. Because I feel like to them, I was the greatest burden, and I wanted to give them like a peace offering, like meet them halfway. Like, I swear I'm not being a burden to you, but this is what's going on with me. And that really helped me start to open up. And then, yes, the Salesforce community has been, I saw how amazing and supportive they are of our LGBTQ plus community, and even Black Lives Matters. And I was like, well, there's gotta be a space out there for someone like me and a community like us. So I just kind of brought my story to the community, and they actually embraced me with open arms. And like you said, other people are speaking up and coming out of the woodwork, and we're all standing up together. So, Salesforce is something really special, and I don't think I would have done this anywhere else.
So how does it feel to you, obviously, standing up, giving that speech, and then having other people in the audience then open up? That must be a pretty amazing feeling that, you're giving people that comfort to then have a voice as well.
Yeah, I am so excited to be part of their journey and find a positive aspect, or be a positive influence for them, or just lead a positive life for them to say, hey, I can get there too. That this is possible for me.
So on the topic of opening up and having these discussions, so obviously it's something you've done with your workplace. And how have you benefited from being open with your workplace? But then also, how did you approach that discussion?
Yeah, well, I've had more experience not opening up than I've had opening up. And so I can tell you, when I was hiding it and not talking about it from my employers, I'd feel stress. I would be unhappy. I'm an incredibly moody person, as you can imagine, with somebody with bipolar. And I'd walk around with a chip on my shoulder with a short fuse, and then I'd cry every week. Like, it was just like I was just radiating emotions. And I was trying to hide it at the same time, and I knew I was doing a terrible job, so I'd have meltdowns because I wasn't like, and it was just this vicious cycle of stress and explosive emotions that I didn't want people to see, and then they saw, and it was just unpleasant. Nobody should live that way and go to work like that. But after I opened up to these folks, I'm not hiding anything, and I can focus on what I'm doing. If I'm having a day where I just can't focus mentally because of my emotions, I'm able to ask for help, and I can move past the situation and get back to work. So like I just they have more patience with me. They also support me, ask me what I need. And it's a great work environment, having to not hide.
So was there something specific about this company that kind of made you feel more comfortable talking? And I appreciate, obviously, in the past, you might not have had the diagnosis, so obviously the discussion might have been different. But just being like, if you look up some of the other environments you've worked in, is there something special about the one now where you feel it was always going to be the right place to be open and communicate?
It was the people. I had feelers out, and I felt like these people actually cared about me, and I was a person before I was an employee. And that speaks a lot to the culture in the company and the values leadership has brought to the company, and the way the managers manage their people. So I felt safe. And I didn't just blast it out there as soon as I got diagnosed. It was kind of like breadcrumbs. At first I said, hey, I'm on this medication, this new medicine, and it's going to make me drowsy. I'm going to be lethargic, and I don't want you to misinterpret it as I don't care. And so after that, something else happened, and I opened up a little bit more and explained to them, this is what's going on. And then a little bit more, like different situations. I was trying to explain my behavior, and eventually I said, you know what, I'm bipolar, and this is what's going on with me. They were really receptive to it. And I had 2 panic attacks at work, meltdowns on the floor, crying, hyperventilating, and they were there for me. They didn't turn me away. So I didn't have to explain myself because they already knew.
We discussed panic attacks recently, and obviously the ones you described there are fairly obvious, I guess, to people that are standing nearby. They would know, I guess, presume that something isn't right. You mentioned that when in your presentation you met Charlie Isaacs and you had a panic attack, but the way you described it to me, no one else would have known. And that's an education point for me, because I always thought a panic attack was the one you just described in the office, but it's not, right? It doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be a visual display of panic.
Yeah, it can take on different forms, and one was a little bit, I think. I was just holding it together as the best as I could when I was in front of Charlie. I was off a little bit to where my friend was like, "You seem panicky. Are you okay?" Like skittish. Couldn't stop moving. I almost felt, and this is maybe a poor choice of words, but like an addict, where I was twitching and moving and I couldn't stop wiggling because I was just had the creepy crawlies and the muscle tensions and the can't get out of a room fidgetiness. So like I was behaving unusually. I had to take off. I had layers. It was wintertime. I had layers on. I had to take off my clothes because I was sweating so bad. So we were at this restaurant and I go to the bathroom and I like change my clothes because I'm taking clothes off because I'm sweating. And I came back to the table and, it's embarrassing, but like you have, gastrointestinal issues when you're under duress. And I had to go to the bathroom quite often. So much so that I said, I'm going to sit at the end of the table. And I made Charlie Isaac sit in the middle of the bench. like I assigned seats because I was freaking out so bad. But like it kind of came off as just being unusual. But, when I went home, it was, I let go of whatever was holding me together. I let go of whatever was holding me together and I just melted on the floor. And again, that was the crying and the seizuring and the hyperventilating.
Mm-hmm. We just discussed obviously telling your employer, and a lot of people out there will be maybe not appreciative of how difficult that is to do, and also there'll be lots of people out there that don't feel they can do that, right? Like it's just not the right environment for you. I think it's really important to be clear with that. Like not everyone is going to be able to do that, right? It's not always going to be something that someone can do. And if a company are like, well, why hasn't someone just told us? It's probably more of a reflection on the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of people, how many jobs have you gone to where employees disclose other things that are just important, that are going to impact their work and their behavior? For example, divorces. People probably go to their managers and say, I'm going through a divorce. Things are really hard for me right now. I may need time off. I may not. Having new kids, just like childcare, or if you have a really sick relative and you have to take care of them and you have to make these accommodations. And those are things that I think people, very, important, serious situations that people go to their managers about and are like, how do you work with me on this? And why can't we add like mental illness to that conversation and say, hey, I have this going on. I'm perfectly capable of doing my job, but this is you can expect of me. This is what could happen. What are we going to do in these situations?
Mm-hmm. So for any hiring manager or company that would listen to this and think, I would love to have the kind of environment where people are comfortable to have these discussions, but I don't know where to start. Like, does it start from the top down? Is it the discussion the CEO has to have and try to create that safe space? Like, are there any kind of tips or things you've seen work well in your current organization that might help people on that journey?
I wish, and that is $1 million question. And honestly, I don't have the answer to that just yet. And I'm hoping by getting out there and sharing my story and starting these conversations, we can bring those decision makers together and even the people who have this stuff and find that common ground. I did have a hiring manager in one of my sessions and asked just what you asked. How do I make it a welcoming environment? It is a leap of faith for somebody to open up like that, not knowing how they're going to be received. I would say company culture is super important, and that is something that comes from the top down that leadership has to nurture. And again, it comes down to the managers who create the environment and execute that vision. And for me, like I said, I felt safe, and that's a nod to my managers who had that environment for me to feel that way. So I think it may be up to them to just make it known, hey, if you want to talk about anything or whatever, let me know, and we'll work with you. You're valued. You're a person to me, you're not just an employee, And then also you got to think hiring managers could have mental illness too. It works both ways. So how do we deal with those situations? And those are conversations that we need to have. And we're going to have them if we start talking about it. So we're still in phase 1 of let's just open up and talk about it, bring the people to the table. Phase 2, let's find some solutions, maybe put together models and execute them to anybody that'll listen, anybody in the Salesforce ecosystem. Salesforce, hopefully, let's put a badge out there. Let's guide people on how to do this for our community. So.
Yeah, and it takes people like yourself to stand up and kind of be heard, and then hopefully the momentum will gather, and I'm sure it will, because this ecosystem is all about being open and collaborative and making people feel comfortable. And like I think you only started recently going to Salesforce events. Am I right?
Yep. Yeah. I was an admin in quarantine during COVID. That's when I came into Salesforce, was during COVID and shut down. So this year I'm really getting out there and like stretching my legs and meeting people. And I've gone to my first conferences, like you said. And I'm going to Dreamforce this year. Yep, so that's going to be cool.
So I think if you go to an event, like if you go to Dreamforce, you immediately get that sense of openness, and everyone is welcome, right? It's just it's a melting pot of cultures, and everyone just kind of feels at home, I think, in that space. Like, well, I can't speak for everyone, because I'm sure there are people that don't, but that's what everyone seems to be aiming for, to just make it an environment where everyone feels safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think, standing up and having this discussion, hopefully that's a starting point for mental illness to become a hot topic as well in the ecosystem, and everyone that is struggling or suffering with a mental illness then feels safer and more welcomed into the ecosystem.
Yeah, Dreamforce is an awesome platform to get that message out there, and Salesforce must think it's important, because they've invited me to bring it to Dreamforce. So I'm excited they have their backing in that respect. But we got to open up those conversations, make those connections, and see where this goes, because we do have a lot of questions, and I can't answer them alone, and I can't be up here as an expert and say this is how you do it, because I don't know. I only have the one diagnosis, and I've been lucky enough to have the one job that accepts me. What do we do with all those other people out there that aren't in this situation?
So what about like resources that have helped you, and or even people, anyone that's kind of helped you get to this point?
Therapy. Therapy. It takes a while to find a good therapist, one that you click with, and then a psychiatrist for the right medications who monitors your therapy and your drug intake. And then also, I went to a National Alliance of Mental Illness, NAMI. They have a lot of education about different diagnoses. And then they also have support groups. They also educate family members and peers so that they don't drown in what you're going through, because it can be overwhelming for the support system, but it also educates them on what we're going through as well. So I really like that. And in my time of crisis, I didn't think of it, but when I was struggling with suicidal thoughts, I reached out and I called someone very close to me. If I had known to think about calling the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, I wish I could have done that and not put the burden on my loved one. But reaching out in a time of desperation, having somewhere to turn is so important. And so I really want to make sure people do know that there are places to go if you reach that last end of your rope and have nowhere else to go. Mm-hmm. So getting a source like Suicide Prevention Lifeline out there, their contact information, super important.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely agree with everything you said there. And final point, I guess, anyone that's listening to this and is grateful for you opening up and starting this movement in the ecosystem, and might be struggling a bit, and just some advice you would give them, or some I guess what you'd want them to hear from you today. What would be the kind of key message?
If I told myself that I'd be happy and healthy and thriving, as we discussed earlier, I don't know if I would have believed you, but I knew deep, deep, deep down I really wanted that for myself. It took a lot of hard work. Yeah, I asked for help, and I encourage everybody to ask for help, but they got to know it's going to take work. So you got to invest in yourself. In my speech, I say it was when I decided to respect myself that I was going to get help and work through it. That's what got me to the other side. It didn't happen magically overnight. It was a step-by-step process with a lot of help along the way. So you need to accept the help. Don't worry about the guilt that you're putting on other people, because they much rather see you alive than not. They help you. You got to focus on you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and doing so much to end the stigma around mental illness. And hopefully this is, like I said, everyone gets behind it and we hear much more about it, and people are comfortable speaking more openly, and we see a lot more of this because, like you said before, that's the only way that people are going to get the help, when they see others talking about it. So thank you so much, and looking forward to hearing more about the session that you're doing in Dreamforce, and have an amazing time. I'm sure you will.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to get this message out there.
Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the chat, and if you did, please make sure you have subscribed for future episodes that are coming through. I would also be very grateful if you would consider leaving a review on your chosen podcast platform, as 5-star reviews will help us to reach more trailblazers from across the world. I look forward to sharing another episode with you soon, and thanks again.